with a piglet, like a pet pig or anything, and say, I need help? What's the most unusual pet?
So,
Let's start with that one.
So I did have, when I worked in Mansfield a long time ago, hi Rachel, a number of people that had Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs.
Love them. Love those guys.
And as house pets, literally as house pets. Because they could be trained. We're going to talk about training later, but this is pigs. And they would train them in the house. And then you get these people that start to say, oh, I've got a miniature pig. And actually, no, it's just a baby pig.
It's just a baby one.
3 years later, it's like the size of a house.
Yeah.
Look, they're going, what do I do with it?
Do you let us Vietnamese, do you let a little pot-belly pig, do you put little booties on him, little rubber booties? He'd churn up your floors. They've got pointy feet, don't they? They make bits of your carpet, don't they?
To stop them slipping on the slippery floor.
Yeah.
The laminate's terrible for them. It's like stilettos. They leave little dints.
Yeah. I love pigs. Oh God, I love them. Yeah, I have seen that before. I've seen stories of people going, I thought it was a baby pig or a tiny pig, and there's like a picture of a guy in an apartment with like a 300 kilo sow on his couch. It's obviously a joke. But actually, I heard there was a guy in New York that got arrested because he had a 400-pound tiger and an alligator in his apartment in Manhattan. Can you believe it? And he started calling for help because the two of them started fighting. It's like, can you imagine the guy going up the stairs with just sacks of meat every day? It's like, where is he going? I mean, what a lunatic. Anyway, bloody hell. So how's your week been, Brad? As it hopefully hasn't been too stressful, because I can imagine tonight is all about the stress.
Well, I wouldn't say too stressful. I mean, there's been a few things that have irked us both, and I think we've had that in our chat, haven't we? And I think we should deal with that. Let's I think it's thanks Karen for last week. Brilliant of you. Loads of people said thank you, and she's just posted about the 600-pound pig in somebody's house. I can't imagine.
It's always going on about Esther the Wonder Pig. Is that what she's?
That's the one.
Okay, Esther the Wonder Pig. Look that up. But before we get into it, patreon.com/rawpetmedics. Guys, if you're on there, you can afford the price of a cup of tea, coffee. It helps us prepare for nights like this, where it took us a couple of hours of prep to get this sorted out and back up what we're trying to say. So that really helps. Patreon.com/rawpetmedics. Price of a cup of coffee a month is all we ask. If you can, great. If you can't, no sweat. We're going to be here anyway every week because we love it secretly. So so listen, we were just saying at the start there, Bren, let's deal with the big thing that came up that really bothered us both. This latest study from on vegan pet food. Do you want to start us off?
There is a post going up, so anybody who wants to read this in about 5 minutes time, there will be a post going up showing the paper that we're talking about. Really interesting to go through that paper. That although there was only 1 year difference, they still made a big thing about 1 year difference in the average age. Raw meat diets still came out top in that paper. But all we heard about was vegan foods are better. I was just like, how is that? Just even, but anyway, putting that to one side, and putting to side that actually the prof that was there hasn't really contemplated the biological significance of what he's feeding. And it was really interesting hearing so many people respond on media outlets that were pushing this, isn't this great about vegan diets, and they're going to be so much greener and we can feed our dogs them and there's going to be so much healthier. And actually so many people, and it's probably some of our viewers, and I think even Nick might have got himself in there, because I heard one text from Nick, don't know which Nick, might have been ours, saying it's just like feeding rabbits raw steak, it just isn't right, don't do it. So it was just ridiculous. It wound me up so much, but I went into all of the little areas. Some of the paper is written so badly, they've made assumptions about health issues with raw food without any references to those issues that they're saying are just there. That's just such bad science. I just hate it when people do that. They make, it's been proven before, I'm not going to go there and show you any references. It's like, no, what references are you making that decision on? let's pretend it's just known, because it isn't.
That leapt off the page for me. In fact, just what you're referring to there, Bren, listen to the conclusion. This is a really, really strong conclusion to this study. We'll come back to the fact that it's just a survey and 2,500 pets. But listen to the conclusion. Significant evidence indicates that raw meat diets are often associated with dietary hazards, including nutritional deficiencies and imbalances and pathogens. Accordingly, the pooled evidence to date indicates that the healthiest and least hazardous dietary choice for dogs are nutritionally sound vegan diets. So that's what Bren's talking about, guys. That is a very strong statement from a professor. And when people hear the name professor, they think, well, Jesus, you don't get there by being stupid, you know. And that is a very, very strong statement. And really big statements need really big evidence. And when you go to the paper, there is zero. When I say zero, there might be one or two kind of implications that this may happen. You know, they don't show studies of it happening, and they certainly don't report on the actual much stronger surveys in their own. Think about this survey that they did, okay, that this study was based on, that Professor Knight engineered. 2,600 people is a survey. So there's a thing called the pyramid of evidence, okay? And quite ironically, Pete the vet was in the BSAVA conference. That's the British Small Animal Veterinary Association conference, talking about raw meat diets there 2 weeks ago. I mean, who else would you ask but the owner of a rice-based dry food brand? And he came in and he was extolling the importance of the pyramid of evidence. And when you look at the studies that we have for raw, when previously he said there wasn't any studies for raw, there is a few. And when you look at them on the pyramid, they're not brilliant. It's not like we've got this huge double blind where nobody knows what's going on over years, thousands of pets, because the raw food industry doesn't yet have that sort of funds or oomph, but it's getting there. And the studies are coming out and they populate the ladder in places. The point is, at the bottom of that ladder, okay, just above case studies done by an individual vet, but it has to be of quality, so it would have to be a Bren or somebody's expert opinion. That's the bottom rung. And just above that is surveys, because surveys are so poor. I mean, of the 2,600 people they asked, they just sent out a questionnaire, fill in what you want, only 336 were vegan. So he's basing this whole study and the benefits of vegan pet food on the responses from 300 vegans feeding their pets, very incorrectly, vegan pet food. And if you ask them, is that a good idea? What do you think they're going to say? They are feeding this product to their dogs. Do you think it's a stupid idea? Do you think they're going to go, actually, it's a terrible idea, my pet is healthy? Or you might just
something called confirmation bias. Okay,
right on.
This is, absolutely. So, it's really important that you point that out. There is a huge amount of confirmation bias. And what got me is some of the commentaries out there that actually there are professors. So he's not a professor in a veterinary department. Okay, that's one thing to make sure of people understand here. But actually, there are professors in veterinary departments discussing nutrition in various veterinary schools across America that were pointing out that actually this is dangerous in the fact that actually there are so many vegan diets which will be poorly balanced over time, and actually a year is not long enough, which also makes me laugh because a lot of them back up AFCO, which relies on 6 months, but that's another matter. They're saying a year is not long enough to see the damage that some of these diets can do. Okay. And actually with the confirmation bias, the number of visits to the vet is going to be down. The opportunity for that vet to make an adverse comment within their 10-minute scheduled consult is going to be down. How are they going to possibly get in the survey, my vet said there was a problem? They're not even probably going to go in more than once in that year.
They're not going to diagnose nutritional deficiency or, and listen, and crucially, they didn't involve any vets in the health of these pets. This was based on guardian opinion and predicted veterinary opinion. So what do you think the vet would say about your dog? And on the back of this survey of 2,600 pets, 300, just over 300 of them vegan. Professor Knight, not a vet, is not in the veterinary department. I'm not sure if he's a vet by background, but actually his background is possibly what's slanting this a little bit. And I can't comment on the way he does studies. I'm sure he means the best. But the problem is, if you're going to bring out a survey, coming back to what Pete the vet was saying, you've got this pyramid of evidence, and down the bottom is surveys, because they're just completely lopsided. You can't trust what you're seeing. They might be a handy indicator, But, you know, you can, a pet food company can produce a survey of their own clients, and the clients will respond more positively than a random sample of the population. If you want to see, did a drug, what was the effect of, you know, mass vaccination? You don't ask Pfizer to do the study, okay, and do a survey. You're going to do a random sample of the population. Is the only way to do it. So down the bottom is survey. But isn't it very interesting that in his conclusions, Professor Knight says that raw dog food significantly related to risk. He didn't mention the very biggest survey yet published that I've seen is 16,500 dog owners by Helsinki University on the safety of raw dog food, not mentioned in his piece at all. So for a guy that puts such value on such a poor survey, he didn't mention a colossal survey that didn't just look at one dog over a year. It looked at every dog you've ever owned in your entire life, raw feeders, okay? Have you ever seen any pathogens cross between the food and the human? So that is many dogs, thousands of dog years, millions of meals, 16,500 owners, a tiny, tiny little bit was found, safer than probably fresh food. And that's not mentioned in these studies. So what you have is a terrible, almost useless survey that has then been branded out by and pushed heavily into media. Now listen to some of these headlines from media. Okay, check this out. This was the Guardian loves a bit of it, so I'm not gonna read out the Guardian. I told you I'm giving a complete embargo. Listen to the Metro. Okay, vegan diets may be healthier than those munching on meat. Okay, so straight away that's the headline, than those munching on meat. The study actually concluded munching on meat could be healthier than vegan diets. What they meant to say was in the paper was meat-based diets. And clearly, when you're talking about meat-based diets, vegan pet food, Professor Knight has done this before in the other survey that they bandy around, which is vegan pet foods compared to meat-based pet foods. And the meat-based pet foods are pet foods with chicken or with beef, which is actually with chicken bone meal or with beef bone meal, which is 4% bone meal in their product. So they're comparing their possibly well-made vegan diets with possibly better minerals, maybe chelated minerals and all sorts of cool things in there. Okay. And they compare them to the worst pet food you can imagine, cereal-based pet food with 4% bone meal. And that's their comparison. And what they put out to the media is, we compared our vegan foods to meat-based dry food. No, you didn't. That is 4% bone meal. There's more meat in a butcher's knife. So straight away, the Metro's title, vegan dogs may be healthier than those munching on meat, completely incorrect. Well done, Metro. And the very next line, dogs may actually be better off eating vegan food than meat, a new study has suggested. That study didn't show anything of the sort. It was a survey, a completely useless survey, Professor Knight. If I could say one more thing on this, Bren. Professor Knight, you get to be a professor by producing papers, okay? So you can be a professor of anything, and if you put out a lot of papers, a university's job is to produce papers, a department, and if you don't produce enough papers, you're in the wrong place, and if you produce lots of papers, you can get your stamp as a professor. That's how professorships are earned. They're hard-earned with a lot of academic publications, okay? And academia and science are two very, very different things. So Professor Knight has a lot of publications. The problem is, Professor Knight is a professor of animal welfare and ethics, okay, which is quite ironic considering we're talking about health here, long-term health, and founding director of the Centre for Animal Welfare and the School of Environment and Science. And I think the environment thing is the problem, because most of Professor Knight's studies have been in the environment, and Professor Knight has made comments many times that the reduction of meat consumption by dogs would benefit the planet. And here lies the problem, because the only reason I have very slowly started going back towards meat after 10 years being a vegetarian, I'm not slagging off the vegans because I was a vegetarian for a long time, is because, so either Professor Knight is not reading these books that have just put that to bed, okay? We know, from the omnivore's dilemma to defending beef to everything else, we know the problem is the science is filthy, and it's associated with what's going on in CAFOs, which is a terrible way to raise beef, and it's terrible for the planet, produces huge amounts of CO2, all the horrible shitty grain, all that, the cows belch and fart more on the stuff. Okay. But we know that organic farming needs a certain amount of manure, and sustainable farming is a really good thing to do. In fact, it takes more carbon from the atmosphere. Grass grows so fast compared to a tree that they dump out 50 pounds of manure every day and create soil as opposed to deplete it. We now know that ruminants play a crucial part in it. So what I suspect is going on here is a massive bit of cognitive dissonance on Professor Knight's part. And I'm sorry to say it live, but it's a fact. I think he's built a career, 30 years, producing papers on the dangers of eating too much meat and beef and that. And you look back over your career, and at that stage, after producing all those papers, you have to eventually say, shit, it turns out that ruminants might be a really important part of it, and perhaps I took the wrong slant. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do. Very few people can look back and shit on their career and go, I was totally wrong. Really good scientists can, but people that have just about to retire and I'm a professor and this is hard work, I'm not saying this is what Professor Knight is doing. I'm just saying that this possibly could explain the inability to see that meat, unfortunately, is going to be a very important part of how we're going to get out of this situation. Whether the vegans want to hear it or not, vegans don't have to eat it, but ruminants will. And so I think when he starts saying that dogs will be healthier on this without any sort of evidence, I can see where that comment is coming from. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to rubbish any of his career. I'm sure his academic work is unbelievable. But that's where these two ridiculous surveys are coming from. And then people like Pete the vet, who on one hand 2 weeks ago say extolling the benefits of this pyramid of evidence. Surveys useless. So forget the surveys of raw dog food. These huge surveys showing it's safe, ignore them. But on the same hand, Pete the vet was on our primetime kind of news shows. And no doubt has been talking about vegan pet food numerous times. And he's saying that vegan pet food is healthy for pets on the basis of 2 surveys by Professor Knight with a tiny amount of people in it. You can't have it both ways. And this is the problem. It's like, here's some shitty science to support us. Ignore all the really good science over there. We're not talking about that. I hate it as an approach. And so I agree, Bren. What are we going to do about this, Bren?
Well, I mean, the other thing is there is a study showing the benefits of raw. There's that whole inflammatory mediator, the homocysteine stuff that actually shows the improvements in dogs which are on raw meat diets. And actually, that's what they should have been doing, is they should have been running concurrently those tests which are out there in the science to show that, by all means, if they then show that those inflammatory mediators and all of the epigenetic stresses go down, that's when you can say that diet is good for dogs. Okay, albeit that it's processed, and we've got to work out, are we allowing ourselves dogs which will eat a processed diet for the rest of their genetic line? Then that's an option if it's possible. Is that going to be a good thing for the environment? Well, with all the monoculture and the chemicals that are used to produce those crops, I doubt it. But let's be good scientists and say until it's proven, we'll go with them. But at the end of the day, I think there's so much bad science within that paper that for all of you guys who are getting asked the questions when they come into you in the stores, in the groups, in the all of that side of things, you can say, watch this little bit. I think we've taken that apart well and truly, and just read the paper. We've posted that up now. That's on our page. So if you're watching us live, great. If you're not watching us live, you'll have seen the post go up.
I like that point, Brent, because you just nailed on something. They've ignored a few of the studies. We've got this increase in homocysteine, gene expression of histamine, because that study in 2018. We've got the gut flora stuff, and many little things that we would expect to come from ultra processed pet food, because you can't chemically preserve dry food and expect to have normal gut flora. So that's a good thing. When these things exist out there in the science, how they read it, well, then why don't you just put your vegan pet foods to the test and compare that to raw dog food? Get vets to analyze those pets at the end of the year and tell us that those animals, and not even a year, 5 years. Smoking doesn't happen. If you want to see the effects of smoking, 11 smokers against 11 non-smokers will do perfectly good against each other. After 45 minutes of football, it's the second half that you want to see it in. So long-term studies, we dare to dream. But even the homocysteine stuff, you're totally right. Start with that. Prove to us that your stuff isn't inflammatory to pets, as all ultra-processed food and ultra-processed protein and stale fats and chemical preservatives and all this shit that goes into it. Like, prove that that's not having a negative. But instead, they compare. It's an unfalsifiable comparison. A well-made vegan dry food with good intentions compared to crap cereal-based pet food. That they call meat-based mistakenly, and that's the comparison. It's an unfalsifiable comparison. They're never going to look bad beside that. They're only going to look equal or slightly better depending on what measures they go after. But don't go after the measures they know they will fail on. It's classic. It's just it's wrong.
And a couple of people mentioning some sort of historic dietary stuff. I know that there are some people in the States that wrote stuff 20 years ago, 25 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, actually looking back. And I know a lot of that was based on human health advice about cycling through certain vegan diets at certain stages to feed do not get mixed up with what's current science is saying about some of those foods in our canine friends. Okay. You know, there was a lot of stuff said. I mean, I even said some stuff back in those days which was based on human advice, and I would now go back and just say that's not where I am currently. You know, it's definitely not where we should be when we look at the current science.
We make
I mean, we're going to talk about something. You know, the reason for calling Dietary Destress tonight is actually we wanted to talk a little bit about behavioural stuff. And we've already taken up half of our time in ranting about different dietary stuff. So hopefully we're going to just open this up over the next 20-30 minutes or so.
Can I say one more thing, Brendan, before we leave this point, just so what you were saying there. The problem is, and that it's hard. That's hard for people. I'm talking to my wife about it, and she goes, "Oh, Jesus, you say one thing one year, and then the next year, oh, we're not vegetarians anymore." And I said, "No, we are 98% vegetarians, but I need to get some stock into my diet at a minimum." You know, so this was the change for me to go back. It was Catherine Shanahan that did it to me. Deep Nutrition, for any nerds out there that want to listen to a very unbelievable book on nutrition. That's the best one I've heard. Phenomenal information. Breaks it down to 4 little groups and kind of explains why vegetarians with shitty knees like me don't heal so quick. If I'm not going to give it good calcium and chondroitin and collagen and all the stuff I promote for dogs with arthritis, where was I getting it? You make tiny bits when you're healthy. But anyway, look, I would say the problem is with diet is that it's a new, it's exploding in information. So what we thought about saturated fat was sullied by the company that wanted to sell shitty fats that they made themselves, the margarine sector. So they invented this product and wanted to sell it. So they bring out a couple of bad studies and they get it to the front of the newspapers because that's what they do. And then we all go around thinking saturated fat is bad. We thought the same thing, like we thought carbs played a massive role in the causation or fat caused pancreatitis. Now we know it's carbohydrates, but it's hard to correct all that science. And every year, the science has moved away on the salt debate now. That's an unbelievable book. I can't remember that salt book. But it's like, that's on a flip-flop. It's like good salt is good. Actually, bad salt has been sullied with bad fats and the ultra-processed diet. And it's hard to tease it out. So every year you can turn around and go, oh, we're not thinking that about it. And every time the answer is the normal way of doing things was right. I swear to God, every time. Like ruminants walking across grass and like, butter and like cream and like anything else they tried to take away, eggs, eggs was a breakfast cereal effort. One little ridiculous study from dehydrated egg and they said, this might spike your cholesterol. No, it didn't. Never did. But we all still believe that. How many eggs can I have? Is a little bit of seaweed okay? And so we're left with these headaches that it's hard to scrub it clean because the media is way better at pushing the message through than the science. So that's the trouble we have. When the science does a flip-flop on you, and you, particularly when your whole career has been based around saying saturated fat is bad, you will hang on and you won't see the light because, you're a pay packet and your mortgage and your kids going through depend on that. I'm not saying that is happening to anybody, but there's books written on cognitive dissonance, and that's the driver. Like, I have already staked my claim that this is the case. If raw dog food is ever bad, I'm in deep shit, But, like, you will hope that you will turn around and go, oh, vegan pet food's better. Great. I'm delighted. Less animals killed. I would care about that. But unfortunately.
And to talk, right, so somebody's just asked, what's the book recommendation? Look, we're going to go back to that one first and foremost. You can have a look at that. The other thing is, last but not least, there is another YouTube video from another surgeon, an ophthalmic surgeon this time, extolling the issues around the fats and seed fats particularly and grain fats that are out there. So I'll post that up on Facebook for you guys to have a little chuckle at, because we've been talking about that. But definitely Deep Nutrition by Catherine Shanahan is a favorite of ours, I think, from last year. I think it reached one of our top 3 books of the year, wasn't it? For last year. So great. Look, they're asking us to move on. They'll be getting all of the gems. I've scheduled posts of the various meds and things that we were going to talk about to go through this evening. They're already up there. okay, Bren, listen, I am depressed and stressed after all that. And there is a difference between depression, anxiety, and everything else I'm learning. So listen, tell us, I'm alarmed at the rise of diazepam in pets. It's exploded in the US. It's come into the US. It's been legal in Ireland for vets to recommend it as of last year, December last year. It's Valium, guys. Diazepam is Valium, and it works great. Okay, so if you want to switch off your dog, lash a load of Valium into him.
Can you tell us a little bit about these drugs? What is on offer that you can use and can't use? What's the difference between the couple of different drugs that are used? Can you give us a bit on that?
Yeah. So that look, the reason for talking about this is that there are lots of supplements out there, and we're going to touch on those as we come through this evening, and talk about why they may not be as effective for our raw-fed friends, or some of them may still be effective, and you need to look at those. But what we thought we'd touch on first is the drugs that are available, and why I get a little bit itchy about recommending them. They have a use where you've got dogs which are in, almost apoplectic fear scenarios. I've seen some where they can't step out of the threshold of the back door because the slightest traffic noise or the slightest dog at the far fence sets them off, and they retreat, and they're barely going out to the toilet, let alone, and those are circumstances where you've got to press the button to release their anxiety, to allow them to come forth. And it is so important whenever you give anything to help with the behavior of your pet, that you literally look at all of the almost CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy that should go alongside that. Okay, and I'm going to reiterate that through tonight, but it's so important. These drugs are not a quick fix where you can just give this and done. Okay, and too many people are addicted, and I'm afraid that there's too many vets out there that are not necessarily behaviorally minded to talk about retraining. And it will be, your dog's got anxiety, this is an anti-anxiety medication, off you go. And we are back to where human, well, actually probably still is to some degree in some places, and it depends on your individual doctor as to how much into therapies and talking and all of that they are into, but there's still a lot that will give out Valium. And that's the same, diazepam in a firework phobia sensation is something that's been given to try and just give them a quick fix, help them forget. It's an amnesiac. It forgets the stress at that point. It's an anesthetic. You're effectively giving them something that's going to wipe their short-term memory. So it's usually effective. If you give it, it will usually wipe their short-term memory for up to 40 minutes before they've had the medication. So you can just blitz them in that. And there are some licensed products for that now in Europe. Okay, certainly in the UK, TVM do a diazepam. But it is used generally for reducing seizure activity. Okay, it's not thought of as something for an anti-anxiolytic. As is Xanax, is a human medication, is often used in that circumstances as well. And those are circumstances where, again, please, this is not a therapy. This is just to get the dogs over an abject fear in that moment. The downside is, because it wipes their memory, they will not learn a jot from that episode. So you cannot retrain them whilst on Valium equivalents. Okay, the benzodiazepines do not help them. Okay, so do not think that you're giving them a long-term help for their phobia against fireworks or thunderstorms or whatever. If you're using those products, you are getting them through. You're using it as a crutch, and that's it as alone. Okay, certainly I will take this opportunity. Do not use acepromazine at all in any circumstances for trying to resolve an anxiety issue. All that you're going to be doing is sedating the dog, allowing them to receive all of the alarming signals, and yet not being able to do anything about it. Okay, and you end up with a even more stressed dog that comes around from the sedation. So please do not use acepromazine. Okay. I'm going to take a breath for a moment.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the other two things that we really want to talk about, because these are two licensed behavior drugs now. One is the Prozac of the dog world, which has now got a license in the UK, something called Reconcile, which is fluoxetine, okay, fluoxetine. I think sometimes get me if I'm saying it
sounds
wrong.
right.
Okay, and that was used in microdosing as a liquid form before this license came about, because it could just take the edge off and you could still retrain the dogs. But it was so important. All behaviorists have always talked about retraining. And I posted just before we came live tonight, if you're going to seek somebody to help you with training your dog, please, in the UK, and I'm sure around the world there are equivalent organizations, look to those that are standing up against the charter, and effectively you have the reassurance that they're being overseen by a governing body. They are not just going off and doing their own thing. And if you at all get punishment involved, or there is a trainer who's losing their temper with your dog, walk away. Okay, do not, just that's the end of the session. Walk away, do not use them. And please make sure that you are considering a different trainer. It is so important. And Reconcile at least has on its website about retraining. So I've given you the link on the website for Reconcile to actually talk, go through just about dealing with separation anxiety is the one that they use. So look at that behavioral, that CBT, I'm going to call it, the cognitive behavioral therapy, so important alongside those meds. And look at the minimal effective dose. Do not look at the now licensed alternative. So the vets will have to use the licensed alternative first. They don't get a choice under European law and UK law. And so do look at that. Some dogs will become sleepier if you get to the high doses. Okay, and you don't want a zombie dog. You want a dog with quality of life.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what we call an SSRI, so a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what happens is serotonin is released into the nerves, which effectively calm the dog down. And what normally happens is that it's taken back up by the endings, and therefore reduces the amount of serotonin that's floating around in that process, okay, and calming down the anxiety. What tends to happen is if you inhibit that being taken back up and out of that axon, that junction, okay, then you build up serotonin, you reduce the anxiety transmission going across that axon. So that's what an SSRI is, okay. The other thing that's far older, so came out 2006, is something called Clomicalm, which is clopyramine. And that is a tricyclic antidepressant. Okay, so not Prozac. It was called Prozac for dogs back in the day, but it's not Prozac. Prozac is fluoxetine. And that works really in a different mechanism to suppress that anxiety. It is thought of alongside Selgin, that came out around the same time, which is a dopamine drug, and that is meant to reduce that anxiety transmission. But again, they both say you should retrain your dog whilst on it. The downsides to them, as you said, for humans, they're addictive. For dogs, you have to wean them off it. You cannot just stop it. So effectively, it is addictive for dogs too. Okay. And it is also, you watch out for those side effects. They are reported on the data sheets. Okay, I think I've put up for the links for the data sheets for those drugs as well, either on the websites or through the European Medicines Agency. And on there, you will be able to see the side effects. So you must monitor liver enzymes if you're giving clopyramine. Okay, so just please, do not just give these drugs and think, oh, they'll be fine. I'm going to stick them on them. They'll be on them for 3 years. They'll be all right. No, please, you should be monitoring liver enzymes at least on a monthly basis if you've started Clomicalm.
I'm just concerned about the growth of these. Okay, so they are being taken up very quickly. So it's the growth in this sector is huge. I can't help but think that it's a bit of a big pharma kind of wet dream to get high anxiety dogs, COVID pups. You know, we bought so many of them at the wrong way, and Ireland pumping out these puppy farms. If you can believe it, we made it a tax incentive for farmers to turn into puppy farmers in 2010 in the crash, and we haven't revoked that yet. So we're just exporting all these pups out to Ireland and England and every other country and causing a lot of problems, as a lot of other countries have their problems too. But so we see these pups reared in a box beside their, a stressed mother, fed crap, in a dark shed at the end of a field, no human interaction, and poorly bred, and everything that goes with that shot good for, and you get this dog, and you're trying to maintain your little Apu. And so this is an issue that people are having, and I can't help but think that we love a quick fix. We love our meds. There's a reason we've got 15 pharmacies in Greystones and only one health center, one health shop. So I worry that people will ask for these, and I'm worried that vets will give them, because we are being told on the radio, stop taking antidepressants. It's like, I'm not buying them in the news agents, I'm getting them from the doctor. And they say, well, stop asking your doctor for them. It's like, stop asking the doctor. If I see an ad for a drug, that's why they advertise in America and New Zealand, the only two countries in the world that have advertisements for drugs, because people will go in and ask for them and get it from their doctor. They've only got 10 minutes in front of the doctor. The doctor believes this drug is safe and effective. Okay, so check out the effectiveness of antidepressants in humans. Okay, this is taken from a fabulous book I read there a while ago called Feeding Dogs. A 2011 report by the National Center for Health Statistics found that 11% of Americans over the age of 12 years are on antidepressants. To support this sudden and growing need for mood stabilizers is a litany of bad science that makes for depressing reading. Irvine Kirsch, a lecturer in medicine at Harvard's Medicine School, conducted a major review of all the published data, but also the unpublished data on antidepressants, which were hidden by drug companies. It found that most, if not all, of the benefits were due to a placebo effect. Now, I'm just reading out what was found in another study. This is my opinion here, because I know people need these, and certainly people around me, I've seen the benefits of them in some people and the harm of them in others. In fact, a third of meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is an analysis of all the data that we have. And a third of meta-analysis completed on antidepressant studies were written directly by pharma employees, with a difficult to decipher amount of the rest being industry sponsored. More worryingly, a study published in the British Medical Journal looked at documents from 70 different double-blind placebo-controlled trials for antidepressants. That's the top of the top study. They found that pharmaceutical companies were not disclosing the full extent of the side effects and serious harm revealed in their first trials. This was the conclusion of that study, Sharma et al. 2016. We found that a lot of the appendices were often only available upon request to the authorities, and the authorities had never requested them. I'm actually kind of scared about how bad the actual situation would be if we had the complete data. That's from the author of that huge meta-analysis on antidepressants. And I thought, Jesus, that is terrifying. 1 in 10 Americans on them, with no monopoly on the blues. Why are 1 in 10 adults on them? And I see that as terribly worrying. And as a trainer back in the day, and having dogs that you can't train, you're going, Jesus, what's wrong with this dog? I can see how pet owners could only quickly press for that situation. Do you see that as a possibility, Brendan?
Yeah, well, I also see it as there, with this globalization that we see now, the veterinary profession across the world looks to other countries, and America has a lot of influence over other countries, and I think it's sort of an indictment of a veterinary sector looking to what's happening in the medicine world. And I know that there are enlightened doctors out there that are sending patients for therapy, for talking therapies, for CBT, but there are so many that don't have time in the consult room and are just putting children on Ritalin, putting adults on other antidepressants, and just almost that's dealt with and walking on to the next patient. And I'm afraid that I see vets seeing that and going, well, we can do that with these patients. It must be safe because they're doing it for humans. Nobody's kicking off. And they're just doing that, and it's a quick fix. It's that 80s mentality of I want it and I want it now that got us into the whole food business that we're in at the moment. Of trying to battle convenience foods. And that's the parallel you're in, is that you're effectively into a big business that's working on people wanting a quick fix. And what we're going to try and say is, look, there are other ways to fix that through diet, through behavioral therapies, that will help your pet through that, and you
Recover.
need to bear in mind it will not be fixed tomorrow.
Yeah, certainly not.
Okay.
Behavioral stuff. I think people are also sucked in by the science. The science says it works, and the science says it's safe, and it's prescribed by scientists. And I think it's very hard for us to kind of come over the top of that. It's tricky, but there's so much you can do. Look, people are posting up really cool things. There's going to be behaviourists on here tonight, so myself and Brendan are being appropriately aware of our lack of knowledge in the sector. Well, people are posting up some really cool things, and like you'll notice that a lot of the natural kind of treatments, they will start to repeat, and you've got like valerian root and elderflower and a few others, and a number of companies make these really cool calming products. But before we even kind of touch on them, and if somebody's using them and having a great effect, you can write it up there as long as you're not from the company. But Brent, could I share that one slide with you that I wanted to show people on why I suggest raw diet really benefits behavior? Let me just get that ready, and you tell me when that's ready, and then you can pop it over. Okay, so this slide is going to give people the headache. And anybody that has heard my behavioral webinar at this stage probably would have seen this. So it's an absolute mess, but just check it out for a second. So there's something missing there, but it'll pop up in a second. Okay, Bren, can you share that? Yeah? Can people see that? I can't hear anything. What has happened?
It's on there. I can hear you. Don't worry. Let me just hide myself.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. All right.
You can still hear me.
Okay,
I'll hide you too, Connor, but they can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
you need to advance your slide. There you go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, perfect. So listen, this slide kind of encompasses all the reasons why raw works. And the danger is that people look, when the dog has an issue, they say, what can I put into my dog to sort this out? And even just starting off in the very top left, okay, we're not going to do all these, but just to start off in the top left, you'll see people talking about tryptophan. Maybe tryptophan will work. If we put tryptophan in, the dog will benefit. But the studies of tryptophan show it's atrocious. It doesn't work in normal studies, in well-structured clinical blind studies. Where it has been found to work is in dogs with low protein diets. So in one study, it was found to work in dogs on very low protein diets, but that's a study of deficiency. If your dog is on a low protein dry food, let's say cereal-based pet food with a bit of bone meal in it, that would be, to me, very low protein dry food. It is the minimum amount of protein you're allowed to feed the dog. So yes, I would say if tryptophan is a precursor of serotonin, you can give it a go. Why wouldn't you? But a raw-fed dog gets loads of tryptophan. There's no putting more tryptophan into the diet because you can't kid the brain or the gut-brain barrier to take in more of what it doesn't need. Okay, so it's not like an opiate. You can't give these powerful synthetic drugs and expect the same thing from an amino acid. But we know amino acids do help, and we just know that if they don't have them, they suffer behaviorally. But who's talking about that end of the spectrum? Your dog is on raw food with this in high abundance in every respect. There is still some cool little amino acids that are out there. Bren's going to mention one after this that you can find in very strains like green tea and black tea. Okay, that's not something your dog is going to accrue from a raw diet. But most of the amino acids they try to sell you is in raw food in high dose. And then there's like the vitamin and mineral debate. B complex might help. Well, yeah, B complex will help in a dry fed dog because B complex suffers terribly in dry food production and over storage time. But raw dog food.
Oh dear. And he's cut himself. Sorry about that. He was in mid-flow, and what's happened is he's cut himself off. So hopefully he'll come back with the rest of his slide. He's just somebody did mention earlier with regards to the CBD. So there are CBD clinics. There are we do have CBD supplies. There are them around the country, so do have a look at those. Certainly it's worth looking at in the UK, and I know across the world different people will have different views on using CBD in their pets. It will usually have the psychoactive elements, the THC, taken out of the product. So be aware of that. and that's really important for us. So we'll come back to Conor in a moment when he rejoins. Oh, he's coming on, and we'll take it from there. And hopefully we'll get on to some other important supplements that we want to talk about if he comes back. Conor, you're back with us.
I am. Did
your battery cut out again?
No, so I'm having serious Wi-Fi issues the last couple of weeks, so that was annoying.
Oh.
But look, I don't need to show the slide anymore. But
yeah,
what it is we have a big problem with especially nutritional studies, is that there's a difference in deficiency. And so if you compare, the benefits of omega-3 to Mediterraneans to the benefits of omega-3 to English people, you're going to expect that the benefits of omega-3 will be stronger in the English people because they're deficient in omega-3, whereas Mediterraneans have more in their diet. So is that the benefits of omega-3, or is that the dangers of a deficiency? It's the same with a lack of fresh fats. We talked about DHA and puppy brains there last week, and all these cool omega-3s that dogs need. If you take them out, they suffer behaviorally. Well, if you add in omega-3 to dry food, they benefit behaviorally. And is that a reason to buy a behavioral supplement based on omega-3? No, because raw dog food already has enough omega-3. Your raw-fed dogs are unlikely to be deficient in omega-3, especially putting in the odd seafood addition and that kind of stuff. So like vitamins and minerals, mineral deficiency, raw-fed dogs, again, you get the best source of minerals, easy to absorb forms of magnesium and zinc and all the stuff that play critical roles in our behavior. Dogs that are on zinc oxide diets suffer behavioral issues. Dogs on high salt diets, dry food, suffer behavioral issues. When you take it out, they benefit. So there's all these things, but it's all saying the same thing. It's not one individual thing that sold you in a capsule. So when we talk about natural remedies, I would definitely lean towards the herbs and the cool stuff that Bren's got a couple coming up as well that are not food related, because in your food you have got everything you need. And so that's why it's so easy to shift over dry owners that are mad into behavior. It's like there isn't a single, and then we haven't even started talking about gut flora. There's a massive amount of behavioral stuff involved in gut flora. 90% of your serotonin comes from your gut, your gut flora telling your brain to release it. But a huge amount of cool compounds come from the gut flora itself, butyrates and GABA that tell you to relax and deal with the situation. So even that is barely understood, but we know dogs have the same disturbed gut flora when they're rescued from dog fights, from separation anxiety. And so we know raw dog food can get that back on track because there's no chemicals in it. So it's a multifaceted approach that saves you having to think about the nutritional supplements. I would be definitely leaning towards, somebody posted up, something by Jo Arbin there, because she's a veterinary herbalist. So Calming Canine, all those products are kind of similar. Joe's is fantastic. And so any one of those kind of herbal products would be where I'd be leaning. What other kind of, in that kind of realm, Bren, where are you with this? Is there any other kind of supplements that you like in regards to calming canines?
Yes, so there's a number. There's some in this book as well.
Okay.
And if you look at the Amarilla supplement from Mushrooms for Pets, there's alongside some of the lion's mane, there is effectively a really nice sort of discussion about how they can help with behavioral issues. And I think looking at those, one of the things that is commercially available from your local vet is actually Angzitane, and rather than just the standard L-tryptophans and things like that, it has L-theanine in, which I think again is a derivative from certain mushrooms, and it's certainly worth looking at. And I have seen very effective in patients, especially raw-fed patients. And the explanation that you gave earlier, which was about the fact that if your dog is deficient in some of these amino acids because it's not on raw, then you might find these products work well, and hence the papers written about them. But if they're fed raw, you may find a very limited efficacy within them, because they've already had all of those amino acid boosted. And if it's not going to be effective, then you need to look at something as another option.
The L-theanine amino acid you just mentioned there isn't something you find commonly in the food chain. It's in a couple of the mushrooms in that book, I'm sure, and it's also found in black and green tea. So how much of that is your dog going to eat? So this is quite a rare amino acid. And so if you find something, as I said, in a parrot's toenail in Guatemala, and it has some crazy effect on your brain, and you take it, it's going to have a crazy effect on you, because it's not something you get a lot in your food chain. So that might work. And L-theanine, why not? It's not an amino acid that's going to accrue and prey too easy. So added in, it might have an effect. And anything else like that, I would say, oh, why not? Absolutely, I would give it a go. There's another one. There's alpha Kazepine, which is a thing that comes from casein, comes from milk, essentially. And it has an effect, has a soothing effect in cats. But the top studies of it in dogs show utterly, absolutely not. It doesn't stop them promoting it for dogs because it does work in cats a little bit. But that in there is the danger that we have. There's another one that we used to in guide dogs. I'm not sure if there's any behaviorists listening that can help us. Is dog appeasing pheromone, particularly when we were transporting the pups, particularly long distances, and the pups aren't into it. You don't want them puking all over the van. You have to keep stopping. So we'd use a tiny 1 or 2 sprays of dog appeasing pheromone. We'd use them with a new intake of dogs into the kennels, and dog appeasing pheromone. And it's a pheromone extract, the synthetic version of the pheromone the mother emits to get the pups to relax in the nest. So I thought there might be some sense to that. And I showed you a study there earlier on today, Bren, that it does seem to work. I'm very aware of who those studies are produced by, but still it gives me some encouragement. Is there anything else in your box of tricks? What about like in herbs, or what about homeopathy? Is that useful?
Absolutely. When you start to look at mental symptoms, there are many different ones. And I can't go into the individuals because there are so many that are looked at. You've got to individualize to those particular cases, especially around anxiety. And again, even then, I would say it's so important that you look at the CBT when you're giving any treatment, whatever the treatment is, whatever you use, whether it's dog appeasing pheromone, whether it's Anxietane, and you can get it online without a prescription. You don't need to go to your vet for it, okay? And that will probably keep your costs down for those that are anxious about costs. As I say, Mushrooms for Pets is available online. You can look at those. But always, with any of those, make sure you're on board with a good trainer to effectively desensitize your dog. And you want to look at desensitization with those. Valerian, I mean, look, there is the Pet Remedy solutions, which are sort of a herbal aromatherapy combination, which you can use for your pets instead of dog appeasing pheromone. Many people love that. A lot of the essential oils, they will go through those, again offering those up. So there are many options in there without going down these drugs with side effects. Yeah,
you can kind of put them off. You can say, well, the conventional, it's not like it doesn't work. It's not like any of us are against conventional of anything, Jesus, I'm not. But you're just trying to, there is milder cases, there's things we can try, and we're trying to get the dog over the issue. And we certainly don't want anybody that's even thinking about using conventional drugs long term to control the behavioral issues on the wrong track. I conclude that kind of behavioral webinar with setting it all up and then talking about benefits of raw dog food, and then the last third about gut flora, and then I finish on what I would do if I had a stressed dog. And I'd say there's no teaching a dog anything if the foundation isn't right. He needs to be pulled out of whatever stressful situation it is. If he's got negative dog distraction on the street, just stop walking the dog for a little while and let's rehabilitate the dog a little bit, get the gut back, get him back happy, get everything back normalized. Things won't normalize if you keep getting your stressor every day. You're always going to have that dysbiotic gut. So you can't expect, I'll give some probiotics and walk him past a black shepherd every day that he hates. It's not going to work, guys. Or if Hoover's terrifying and you Hoover every single day, obviously he's not going to get over that too quick. So having a little break, certainly dogs coming out of pounds that are aggressive in inverted commas, that are just unhappy, it's about good food, probiotics, rehabilitate them with a few of the supplements we've talked about. The last one we haven't mentioned is CBD. The amount of studies in CBD is incredible. Just pouring out.
I mentioned it whilst you were off.
Did you? Oh, damn.
Yeah,
okay.
when you went to the loo. Yeah.
All right, fair play. Perfect. There's a great vet, Bren. Did you ever meet what's her name? Vicky somebody, or I'm confusing her now. She's over in Switzerland.
Vicky Simon? No.
It's what's her name? I can't remember. But she studies CBD in dogs in Switzerland, and really, really interesting. But like the studies of the effect, and so where do we get it from? Okay, people think it's just from cannabis plants. It's not. It comes from hemp and all sorts of other plants out there as well, and it accumulates in the prey. So dogs don't have to eat cannabis, it actually accumulates in prey, and dogs will get it from prey. So they don't get huge doses of it. And that's why dogs have double the amount of receptors for it in their body. We all have an endocannabinoid system all along our arms and organs and bodies and brains, huge amounts of it in our lungs, everywhere. So it's everywhere. So that tells us we're supposed to be eating CBD all the time, broad spectrum CBD from the plant itself, ideally. Dogs get it from eating prey, but they only get tiny amounts of it. So you only need to give your dog, if you've got the human type, fine, tiny amounts of CBD for really good benefits. But it's not like he's just smoked a joint and he's passed out on the couch. People are expecting these sort of benefits from this, but it's not the same. It just increases your ability to cope. It increases your ability to do public speaking. It decreases your fear of going to the dentist. All these kind of studies. It slightly increases healing time and all this other stuff. It's not a quick fix, but it might be those little. That's where I would go for those supplements rather than nutritional supplements. If that would be my concluding comment on this.
And if you want another understanding of actually, and I've seen a few cases of this recently, how important understanding these stressors to the pet's health generally is. This is another good book, The Polyvagal Theory, by Stephen Porges. So that's talking about just how one being in the same household of people expressing certain ways can actually influence the health and welfare and the relative vagal drives there is. So basically the parasympathetics has three parts of the brain it comes from the reptilian parts all the way through to the mammalian parts, and you effectively will affect the system in different ways. So actually you can get heart stopping moments from the vagus, but actually the vagus is so important in normal function, so normal gut function. So all of those IBSs out there that can be affected by excess sympathetic drive. So the sympathetic drive is the stress, the desire to, the fear, flight and fight modes. That's the sympathetic drive. Well, that's constantly, if you drive that up, the balance of driving up those sympathetic stressors, reducing the parasympathetic's ability to function.
That's interesting.
Comes into that. So understanding how it's beyond just
like that
behavioral therapy we're talking about. This is general whole life issues that it can develop into. And so many people don't recognize those behavioral distress moments. So they end up with their dog, barking, constantly as a little tiny terrier dog, and they just put it down to, it's a little tiny terrier and he does that. Not actually perceiving the stressors that dog's in, and the reason that he's got pancreatitis signs may well be because he's constantly in distress.
Constantly driving that cortisol and adrenaline response and squishing the gut, giving him bad malnutrition through malabsorption, and it's a rotten wheel because it just self-perpetuates. Then one creates the other, and whoop, onto the wheel he goes. And it's not normal for a dog to be acting like that. Dogs can be calm, except my dog Dudley. Most dogs can be calm all the time, and like Dudley is a very calm kind of dog, but it's. You do have a breed effect. He's I've got a Cocker Spaniel here, and like he is on his toes. He's flighty. So that's just the way it is. So if you get a cock of something, you need to understand that your walk is going to be different. It's not going to be like walking with a greyhound, where it's just a nice, lovely, normal walk, or a Labrador or retriever less so than Labrador perhaps. But like this is like it has to be taken into account as well, the individual of what's in front of you. But no dog should be going through this repetitive stress or exhibiting these unfair behaviors. A trainer is the very first place to go to, guys. They're cheap as chips. They come out to your house, a cup of tea, they chat to you, they listen to you, for half an hour, and they'll give you a little bit of advice, and they might just fix one thing. He won't explode when the doorbell goes off. That alone can be all you need just to get him over the hump. There's some really simple solutions to it that you just don't need to go for the head meds straight away, which while they work, can have their own issues. Listen, Bren, I need to go. It's 8:00. My wife's going to kill me.
There is so much more we could talk about tonight. Thank you, Conor, for raising this. I think it's been really useful.
That was a good one.
For everybody watching. We've enjoyed it. If you want to hear more and you want to see more, join us on Patreon. Look at some of the articles we can put up there. There'll be little bits dotted around Facebook, but a lot more on Patreon. We hope you've enjoyed tonight, and look forward to next week. Q&A. So,
Yes.
have a look at, so that's just your general questions. We'll be asking you to pop up on Facebook and on Patreon, and we'll go through some of those, particularly our Patreon followers. If you want to know how to get to us for the price of a cup of tea or coffee, patreon.com
We deeply
/
appreciate it.
medics. That's brilliant. Okay.
That's great.
So,
all right, guys. See
thanks,
you all
guys.
next week.
Take
Thanks
care.
very much.
That's brilliant. Cheers, Connor.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
See you. Cheers, Brent.